Asia is experiencing a new threat. Not a new threat, but an old threat. It's the ghost of the Green Revolution is appearing. And that is a pest, a little insect which I will talk about. These outbreaks had occurred in many areas, and you can see in this map in the last 2 years. The most serious was Thailand, where they lost 1.1 million hectares in just 4 months of their crop because it was a devastating outbreaks. Other places include southern China, northern Vietnam, where another species of the plant hopper is carrying a new virus disease just discovered in 2000. And this virus disease is spreading north. And also in the Yunnan area, poor areas, but this area was unique because the crop was damaged at the seedling stage. The seedlings, that means this problem is not a local problem, it's an international problem. Pests are moving around the region. Some of the pictures you see are the devastation of crops that occur. And in China, what they call pest storm is very common, occurring in cities. Sometimes cities have to shut down because of the huge number of these insects occurring in the region. This insect is called the brown plant hopper. It also carries 2 virus diseases, which now are very abundant in most parts of Vietnam and Thailand. Now, more recently, in the last 10 years, a new species, its cousin, if you can say, called the white-back plant hopper, a little bit different species, but have similar kind of biology. What is significant about this insect is it carries a new virus. This virus was not detected before, and this is the first time you see such this virus occurring in rice. This virus was discovered in the south in 2001, and by 2010, as you can see, it spread all over the place, including Japan, recently found in Kyushu Island. Another concept that we are beginning to look at is how all this, the role biodiversity is going to play in providing the ecosystem service functions that are necessary to provide the ecosystem services that will help develop the resilience of the systems towards outbreaks like this. Now, these insects outbreaks are caused by insecticide sprays. They are secondary problems in ecology. Here you see a picture on your left, a farmer spraying his field. He's spraying for something else. He's spraying for a little leaf-feeding insect. But 2 weeks later, wherever he sprayed had brown patches. It's almost like he sprayed a herbicide. And that is a direct response. And in most of our research, we see these effects all the time. Now, this is a picture taken in Malaysia. You see these kind of effects in parallel rows. You'll be uniquely wondering why in parallel rows. Because the parallel rows are where the sprayer booms are. Because in Malaysia, they use mechanized spraying. And wherever the booms reach, you get them brown. These outbreaks are occurring due to several vulnerable factors that are common. Low genetic biodiversity. For example, in central Thailand, where outbreaks are occurring, 72% of the area grow only 2 varieties. And in Malaysia, where outbreaks are also occurring, almost 90% of the whole of Malaysia has only 2 varieties. This kind of narrow genetic base, it's very vulnerable. Another vulnerable factor that is common in most parts of China is hybrid rice. Hybrid rice, as you know, has very narrow parental stages, and therefore genetic base is very, very small. Another problem is low habitat biodiversity. You get rice with no other habitat, and in many areas, triple, double cropping. The third factor is low biodiversity in its ecosystem service functions, parasitoids and predators. This is due to excessive applications by farmers. The high use of insecticide, especially those toxic to these predators. And also the poor equipment they use. The equipment they use generally are not effective against the target pest, and more effective, in fact, against the natural enemies. And also more commonly, the use of cocktails, mixture of a wide spectrum of insecticides. Why do these outbreaks keep occurring? This plant hopper, we need to treat it not like a pest. It is not an ordinary pest we see. This is a pest created. It's a secondary pest. And it is also very macro in nature. It's not just a local problem. And therefore, we need more macro level type of tools in order to solve this kind of problem. The type of macro tools will be landscape level, and using biodiversity as one of its key dimensions. And also, there is need to look at policies, institutional structures, and concepts, because in the last 50 years, pest management in rice has never changed. It is exactly the same as before. A fire brigade service. You see a pest, you go hit it. The early insecticide used farmer spray cause vulnerability to the system. What it does is it breaks down the ecosystem service, therefore making it vulnerable. And when hoppers arrive at that time, you get exponential growth and outbreak. Farmers doing this is very common. They often spray on top. They don't spray, and these pests are at the bottom. These insecticides do nothing except create vulnerable conditions. Here's some data showing that when farmers do that, they have 10-fold, those fields are 10 more vulnerable to hopper outbreak by 10-folds. Another thing that is occurring very rapidly today is the rapid development of insecticide resistance. Here you see three of the most commonly used insecticides. They have developed resistance to more than 100 folds in the areas we monitor. And in some areas in China, more than 1,000 folds, making those insecticides virtually useless. All this problem has a very big social cost. And it costs more than just loss in yield, but livelihood of people. On the picture, you see Mr. Vichian. Mr. Vichian lost 3 crops in a row, and he was about to plant the 4th. And I asked him, what are you going to do? I'm going to spray on the first day. And this problem perpetuates. We are introducing a concept called ecological engineering. Ecological engineering combines both increasing the biodiversity genetically, habitat-wise, in time and space, and rationalizing the insecticide use so that the ecosystem services that we introduce by biodiversity can function. This is one example in Vietnam. They're using light trap, very simple light traps, to synchronize their planting so that when the hoppers arrive, they don't have rice in the field. There's another one, they call it the escape strategy. In China, fields are deliberately grown with other habitats. Like, for example, in this area, sesame seeds. Sesame plants are grown. Sesame has a unique ability to attract parasitoids, the bees, for example, because they are very rich in nectar. And these fields have serve as resources for the pollinators and parasitoids, a whole series of them. These are some data obtained from that area. You can see that the red bars are the populations of the parasitoids where sesame fields were planted, whereas the black bars were the fields without sesame seeds. Even the frogs in these areas have returned. You can see a dramatic increase in the number of frogs in this area where the ecological engineering were practiced. In Vietnam, they do similar things, but different sets of flowers. The characteristics of these flowers were generally yellow and nectar-rich, belonging to the family Compositae. There are a series of flowers in Vietnam the farmers are planting. Again, some data to show you that in the ecological engineering fields, you find higher densities of parasitoids than those in the non-ecological engineering fields. Also, the parasitism of plant hopper eggs are much higher in those fields. We are moving this. These are some data showing the last 10 years, the dramatic increase in imports of insecticides in many of these countries. This is a chart showing the production of insecticides in China, and you notice the bottom line is the domestic use. So a lot of these are exported to neighboring countries. In resource management, there's always a need for balance. This is a Chinese philosophy my parents taught me. We balance things. We have very positive things that are going on, resistant varieties and so on. Again, there are also negative things that are available in the field. What is necessary is to facilitate the balance. And facilitating the balance is not about biology. It's about system. It's about structural adjustments. And today, the structural adjustments, the structural conditions like inadequate pesticide regulations, ecosystem services are not factored into policies and so on, are favoring the negative forces. Now, the challenges we have ahead is we need to develop ecological tools at the landscape level, and that's what the project is all about, developing ecological tools so that farmers can use at large community levels. We need to develop and sustain educational and motivational programs so that farmers, to sustain farmers' changes in farmers' attitudes, so that farmers are becoming ecosystem managers, not just producers. We need to explore the concepts of payment for environmental services so that to create new incentives for these more sustainable practices. Changes in policies and institutions, structures and concepts is another one of those things I think we need to reconsider. We need to adjust the R&D funding policies to factor in ecosystem service benefits at the macro and landscape levels. One of the things that I've advocated for years, we need to review and reform agricultural policies and structures that will favor sustainable agriculture. And more particularly, reform and structure regulatory systems regarding pesticide legislation. Now, this may be called the pesticide supply chain. The increase in pesticide supply, this is a massive increase over the last 10 years, I see it as an unseen externality of globalization and commercial activities. Because of this, a lot of regulations were relaxed. You find people easily start off a pesticide shop. Regulations and controls are not kept up, have not kept up with the changes in supply chain, okay, and in many cases weakened. Public goods like ecosystem services and environment and pollination and health are now completely compromised because of these. Today, in many Asian countries, the village level pesticide retailers have by default become the local pest control advisors. So the need for reform is urgent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken, for sticking to the time. Let's just